a lot of the action is. Oil up over 106 a barrel for a time this morning. Steps to tap into strategic reserves really didn't ease concerns about supplies. You have a lot of penalties on Russia for invading Ukraine. And a Bloomberg index of commodities jumped to the most since 2009. It jumped up to a record high. The conflict is being seen as a threat to flows of energy, crops, metals, many of which were already tight as major economies had emerged from the pandemic. Here are some numbers for you. Well, on Wall Street, the Dow was down 1.8%, almost 600 points. The S&P off 1.6%. The DAX fell nearly 4%. Yield on 10-year Treasuries down to 1.74% now, and gold $19.45 an ounce. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Ed Baxter with headline news in San Francisco.
All right, thank you, Brian. Russia is changing tactics and moving into a more brutal form of war in Ukraine. Moving from lightning strikes to more widespread universal attacks. UN fears 4 million people. Let me start that again. UN fears 4 million people will flee Ukraine, saying almost 700,000 have already left. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken seeks to remove Russia from the UN Humanitarian Council, and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson places 1,000 troops on standby for humanitarian help. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the first troop movements are starting toward the NATO border, saying NATO troops will not fight in Ukraine. EU, meanwhile, has taken the next step in the initial assessment of Ukraine's chances of joining the bloc. China is now saying it is extremely concerned about the harm to civilians in Ukraine. Wall Street Journal reporting the U.S. is mulling banning Russian flights from U.S. airspace. President Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union under the shadow of war. We'll talk COVID as well, infrastructure on a more targeted basis. And Hong Kong's COVID death rate is now the highest in the developed world, averaging 8 deaths per 1 million people. And HKO1 reporting that the government plans a 4-day lockdown during the testing. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Jules.
Thanks, Ed. Let's get back to Richard Harris, CEO of Port Shelter Investment Management, joining us on the line from Hong Kong, wanting to get more of your thoughts about how the war in Ukraine affects consumer sentiment too, and how that will feed into what equity picks you're looking at. We heard from the likes of Target talking about higher costs overnight. That was even before the war. Now you've got these supply shocks too from the energy space, for example, that companies have to pass on.
Well, I think as I've been saying a little bit earlier, that this is likely to bring forward the kind of recession that we probably expect maybe in about 2 or 3 years' time. I mean, it has to come. We have to have some kind of impact as a result of higher prices. But I don't think it's going to come yet, because although we're seeing oil rising and commodities rising, to a certain extent there are other factors on the positive side. We still have earnings coming through. We are still coming out of COVID. We do have high negative real interest rates, which is going to put a floor under this. So I think at the moment, and we're also seeing interest rates probably not go up as much as we thought. So there are some slight reasons to be cheerful, and it's interesting hearing Brian just now saying that Asian markets are reacting relatively calmly when the markets in the US were down a lot last night. That's quite unusual, because normally our markets lead the U.S., our markets follow the U.S. market.
So if the focus for the Fed, Richard, is much on financial stability, given everything that we're talking about, funding markets and all the rest, given the tensions in the global system right now, and inflation, yes, it's a problem, but we're not going to run the risk of destabilizing markets further. Could that be problematic going forward? Could they really, if they're behind the curve now, could they firmly lose control?
Well, this is the big conundrum for the Fed, isn't it? They should really have taken this in hand 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's too late now. That's over. Investors have to look ahead. And what they are looking ahead is a situation where interest rates are going to stay relatively low, certainly lower than they should be when you've got inflation this high. They can't put it up for fear of causing a recession, for fear of causing stagflation. Inflation is going to continue. It's very difficult to control inflation if you haven't got any monetary sources of dealing with it, and if the fiscal policies are running out of control. So I think we're entering a world where we've just got to live with inflation and just look at particular opportunities in the markets that suits that kind of scenario as opposed to the situations we've had previously.
COVID does seem to be taking a little bit of a backseat in terms of investor sentiment, but certainly not where you are in Hong Kong, where you're facing a potential lockdown, and of course in China, where we're continuing to see the dynamic zero policy play out. How does that affect your view on China markets?
Well, I think we're in a situation now where we're really in the thick of the Omicron cases, both in Hong Kong and we think in China, although the data is not clear. That's likely to run its course by April, at which point all the authorities will declare victory and say what great policies they have. But that's what epidemics do. You know, they run their course. And I think when that happens, the relaxation of the kind of lockdowns, the kind of restrictions we've seen up to now will be positive for the market, positive for growth. I'm not so sure whether it'll help Hong Kong domestically. What really is important for Hong Kong now is the stock market and the fact that Hong Kong is still a great place for Chinese companies to raise money. But certainly for the Chinese market, I think it'll get a bit of a fillip after the hiccups of last year.
Richard, 20 seconds. Does Russia run the risk of kind of becoming a North Korea where it so collapses and is so isolated from the rest of the world? Is that a possibility very quickly?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Russia's still a fairly big and important country, but it has to get over a difficult patch now.
All right, Richard, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Daybreak Asia. Richard Harris, CEO of Port Shelter Investment Management, on the line from Hong Kong for us here on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. We'll give you a full wrap-up of Asian market action and world business headlines coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
We have President Biden's State of the Union. It begins at 9 p.m. Wall Street time. Our special coverage at 8:30 p.m. Wall Street time for you here on Bloomberg Radio, tracking a continuation of the rally in the crude oil market. We'll take a look at top business stories coming up.
Friday, February jobs are in focus.
This is a monster upside surprise, a rather amazing number.
I see the 10-year real yield with a vengeance. Through the numbers of the Fed's March meeting.
Nearly 4 rate hikes being priced into the market for 2022.
The February jobs report on Bloomberg Surveillance.
It does seem that a lot of this may be related to seasonal. This stuff is just unbelievable just to get your teeth into.
Friday morning at 8:30 on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg Television.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICBR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit icbr.org.
Bloomberg is helping train and integrate refugees into new communities.
I grew up in the shadow of the Vietnam War, but my parents lived it. Our family lost everything. I had an opportunity to help those that were like my parents, that couldn't get their foot in the door. Bloomberg is a member of the 10th Partnership for Refugees, which supports men and women to re-enter the workforce.
Bloomberg dedicates almost all of its profits to transforming lives around the world. See how at Bloomberg.com/face-the-data.
Is it time to pivot? Commonwealth Financial Network can help you recognize when you've reached an inflection point in your business. Whether you're a solo practice that's slightly overextended or a multi-advisor firm looking to improve integration. For more than 40 years, we've provided advisors the support they need to position themselves for continued growth and success. Visit Commonwealth.com today and propel your business forward. Commonwealth Financial Network, member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. Market disruption has accelerated the need for increased efficiency and scale in the asset management industry. Do you have the right technology to propel your firm's growth? Bloomberg Buy-Side Solutions are engineered to deliver a seamless enterprise experience so you can gain a competitive edge. Data, analytics, trading, risk, operations, connected. The buy side from every side. Visit Bloomberg.com/buy-side.
You finally found it. The one with the hardwood floors, center kitchen island, even a fireplace. Getting that dream house starts with a mortgage pre-approval from Columbia Bank. Fast, easy, and right online, a Columbia Bank pre-approval is your first step to getting a great rate to let the world know. Back off! Those granite countertops, walk-in closets, and ensuite master bathroom are mine. So get your mortgage pre-approval in minutes at ColumbiaBankOnline.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Traffic is weather. New Jersey Turnpike, Newark Bay Extension eastbound, coming in by 14A and Bayonne. A broken down car has the left lane blocked. And it looks like some slow traffic coming across the Newark Bay Bridge as a result. 78 westbound by exit 49 in Union. An accident. One lane is blocked in the locals. The lanes from exit 50. An accident, Garden State Parkway northbound by exit 138 in Kenilworth. Outbound Holland Tunnel down to a 10-minute delay. 10 minutes out of the Lincoln Tunnel. George Washington Bridge, once you get there, it's not too terrible of a ride. Looks like the ride headed up the west side is much better than it was. It's not perfect. Slow 80s into the 120s. Still some slow traffic coming up the Harlem River Drive. It's sports. To Toronto, the Islanders skating Colorado. The Devils are in Columbus. 5 p.m. pass today. No agreement between Major League Baseball and the Players Association. And now with the result, Commissioner Rob Manfred has canceled the first 2 series of the season. Bloomberg 11:30, 3-day weather forecast. For tonight, cloudy skies will continue. Lows of 40, Wednesday sunny, highs to clear 50. Thursday, partly sunny, high around 40. And then we'll see head towards Friday. 30-day with highs reaching 35 to 40. Right now in Central Park, clouds are cloudy. The current temperature 45 degrees. With the best ride in and out of the city, I'm Ed Kalegi, Bloomberg 11:30, bringing you global news 24 hours a day.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Boulder Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Insider.
It is 8:30 a.m. in Hong Kong, and here in Singapore, I'm Juliette Sarli.
And I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. We had a down day for U.S. equities, Japan following suit. Other markets across the APAC region kind of mixed, and the price action really has been pretty limited. We're going to take a closer look when Brian Curtis joins us in a moment or two. Right now, just a few of this hour's top business stories.
Well, the war in Ukraine pushed crude above $100 a barrel. In response, the International Energy Agency has agreed to deploy 60 million barrels from stockpiles around the world. We're told half of the barrels will come from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The remainder will come from IEA in Europe and Asia. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers are pressuring the Biden administration to help boost domestic oil production and sever its dependency on Russian crude. Here's Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hodden.
There's a lot of pressure right now going on Capitol Hill for the president to attack that is really the lifeblood of the Russian economy, and that is its exports of oil and gas. This is how President Putin was able to build up a $640 billion reserve. This is how he's able to fund his military. Also, where his alleged wealth stems from is all about the exports of oil and gas.
Russia's war in Ukraine will also bring a new challenge for OPEC+. The cartel meets Wednesday. Delegates say they'll probably stick to their plan of only gradually increasing supply. WTI crude $105.82, Doug.
Well, in Hong Kong, the city's banking regulator is lobbying the local government to shorten the quarantine time for travelers. This is the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Representatives told a group of banks that the HKMA will propose a reduction in the hotel quarantine time from the current 14 days all the way down to 7 days, followed by another week of home isolation. Now, the HKMA is arguing a shorter quarantine could give way, perhaps maybe help alleviate some of the concerns that we've been talking about, the livability in Hong Kong and the economic impact there. Sources telling us the HKMA also urged the banking community to stay committed to Hong Kong.
Let's get over to Brian Curtis now for a check of market action. Brian.
Well, thank you very much, Juliet. As Doug mentioned, equity markets outside of Tokyo are essentially flat here. There's very little movement. The Kospi is down less than 0.1%. The ASX 200 is up less than 0.1%. We did get Australia's fourth quarter GDP rising 3.4% quarter on quarter. That was just under the estimate of 3.5%. And if you look year on year, really not too much of a change. 4.2%, the estimate 4.1%.